Hi guys, so the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party of course, was invited to talk about the lockdown that Boris Johnson is about to impose on Thursday. So let's hear what he had to say.
I think everybody is concerned about the rise in infections, the hospital admissions and tragically the number of deaths. That's why 3 weeks ago I called for a circuit break. The government completely rejected that, only now to announce the self-same thing.
So this is very interesting from a political point of view, and I'm not being crass here. I understand that this is detrimental to the economy, detrimental to people's lives. But from a political point of view, it's very interesting because Boris Johnson ridiculed Keir Starmer for suggesting a lockdown for many weeks now, ridiculed the opposition, the Labour Party, for suggesting a lockdown. And now he's doing the same thing that he's ridiculed them for. Now, what's more interesting about all of this is that Boris Johnson is likely to face a rebellion from within his own party. And he's going to need to reach out to Keir Starmer and the Labour Party in order to get these policies through. Now, of course, Keir Starmer's not going to write a blank check. He's going to get in a few digs, get in a few punches, because he knows that he was right and Boris Johnson was wrong, and he's not going to let that go, and he's completely correct to do that. But it is ironic that, up until this stage, we viewed Keir Starmer as weak, as, well, of course, in a weak position. He doesn't have a majority in Parliament. He doesn't have the power to hold the government to account. But because of the fact that Boris Johnson has an 80-seat majority. But now what's happening is that because of these measures, because of this lack of trust between the public and the government, between backbencher MPs in the Conservative Party and the government, Boris Johnson is in a difficult position. And he may need to reach out to the Labour Party to get these policies through. So this puts Keir Starmer in a very powerful position, not just because the government need his help, but because he was right. He was on the right side here. He was calling for these ages ago. The government ignored him. Now the government are doing what he had said. Of course, the government are not saying, thanks to Keir Starmer, because that would be detrimental to them. But the problem with Boris Johnson's government is that it has lost support. Now, it's very important to remember that even though he has an 80-seat majority, there is a rebellion growing, and he risks having a lot of problems going ahead because many backbench MPs in the Conservative Party are receiving a lot of pressure from their voters, from the constituencies, from businesses in those constituencies, and also people who financially support the Conservative Party. Now, the ones who are donating to the party or who have businesses and vote for the Conservative Party, generally, not all of them, but generally they don't care about people. They don't care about the pandemic. They don't care about any of this. They care about their profits. And another lockdown is going to be detrimental for those profits. And what are they doing? They're putting pressure on their local MP to vote against this. They don't care about people's lives. They care about their businesses. And they are afraid that if there is another lockdown, it's going to be extremely damaging for their profits. Once again, they don't care about people. So that's what they're doing. They're putting pressure on the backbench MPs to undermine the government, to ease the lockdown perhaps sooner, not to impose a lockdown at all. That ship has sailed. But you're going to start to see, as soon as the lockdown is imposed and businesses start to feel a bite, they're going to put pressure on the backbench MPs. They're going to put pressure on the government to ease the lockdown sooner, even though the numbers have not come down. And there is a risk that Boris Johnson would end the lockdown too soon, like we saw before. Now, the safety measure there is that Boris Johnson could reach out to the Labour Party, the opposition, in order to get over the line.
And that's the delay now will cost. The lockdown will be longer, it'll be harder, and there's a human cost, which will be very, very real. Now, there's no denying these measures are necessary, and I'm glad that the government has finally taken a decision that it should have taken weeks ago.
once again, get in a few digs, and he's correct here. Boris Johnson deserves to be punished over this. Politically, he deserves to be punished over this because he knew he was making mistakes. He knew that he would have to go into a lockdown eventually, but at the same time, he was criticizing the opposition for suggesting a lockdown. Now, Keir Starmer, I don't think, takes these things personally. He understands it's a political game, and he's probably been in talks with Boris Johnson about how to support the government. But I would like to be a fly on the wall on those on those Zoom calls or whatever, however they meet, because Keir Starmer is in a stronger, growing, continuously stronger position.
Will you, it sounds like you will, this will go to Parliament, will you back the government, will Labour vote with the government on this?
Well, these measures are necessary and we've been calling for them. We'll listen carefully to what the Prime Minister has to say, but these are the measures we called for 3 weeks ago. The scientific advisers said were necessary back in September. So the government has delayed and dithered, just as in the first phase, where they were too slow. They've repeated the same mistake.
So he didn't say yes, but I'm 99% sure he will back them because he has said, look, these are the things we've asked for. He's not going to say, yes, we're going to back the government because this would give away some of his political capital. He has to, behind closed doors, yes, he's going to vote with the government. I'd be very surprised if he didn't. If he abstained, that would be extremely damaging. I think it would be the wrong approach. Vote with the government for this. The government said we need to do a lockdown. Vote with the government. It actually strengthens his position because he's saying, look, I'm helping the government out. The government are in trouble. I'm helping them out. And it's the right thing to do. And it's the thing that I've called for. I don't think he's going to abstain. I don't think he's going to vote against the government. But of course, he's not going to tell the media immediately, yes, we're going to vote, because this would give away some of the political leverage that he would have, which makes perfect sense.
What do you make of the fact that they don't come in till Thursday if this is supposedly urgent? We're waiting.
I think that when measures like this are announced, they should be brought in swiftly. We do need a vote in Parliament, but the last thing we need is days before restrictions come in. If they're necessary now.
Okay, so the idea of that, bring in the restrictions as soon as possible. He's been very careful with his language here, which is understandable, but it's also very political. Yes, we need to do it swiftly, but we need to also have a vote in Parliament. Because if he said we need to do it now, then we need to do it like tomorrow. It would go against the political idea of holding the government to account. His way of holding the government to account is through Parliament. It's not through the media or anything like that. So he has to, it has to be followed through in Parliament. Once again, if you support Parliament having a voice, then it needs to come in after Parliament have their voice. So it makes sense that it's on Thursday. You need to give businesses time, because Boris Johnson was never talking about a lockdown. He was avoiding it. If he had said, look, if the numbers get to a certain level, we'll have to impose a lockdown, then people themselves would have been prepared. This was a bit of a shock, not to people like myself and probably people like yourself watching this. You knew a lockdown was coming, but for many people, they didn't expect that. So to say we're going into a lockdown tomorrow would have been a huge shock to them. So they had to introduce it first, say we're going to introduce a lockdown next Thursday, we're going to get it through Parliament. That was the approach, which made sense. But of course, every day you don't have a lockdown, it helps the spread of the pandemic, and it means people are going to die, unfortunately. So I think this puts Keir Starmer once again in a very powerful position. He's able to control, hold the government to account. He's able to hold them to account in a way that he wasn't able to do before, because he doesn't have a majority, of course. But you're going to see in the next number of weeks a huge amount of pressure coming on to Boris Johnson from his backbenchers. He's going to be under a lot of pressure to ease the lockdown as soon as possible. And if he does, then we're going to see more lockdowns, more restrictions later on into next year, which is not the way to approach this. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?